So I'll start. Yeah, my roll number is 38. And my topic is Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code 2016, Key Implications for Corporate Debtors. Yeah, so ma'am, first of all, good evening, and good evening to my fellow students also. And I have basically adopted a doctrinal research method, and to be precise, the expository study. Before I proceed, I would like to discuss regarding the structure of my paper. I have broadly divided my paper into three parts. Part 1 carries the introduction part, wherein I have discussed the introduction to IBC Code 2016. This is followed by part 2, wherein I have discussed the specific provisions in the IBC 2016 related to the corporate debtors. Further, in this part, I have discussed the key steps in the CIRP process. And in the next part, which is the meat of my paper, I have discussed the implications for corporate debtors. This is then followed by the legal implications like penalties, etc. under the IBC 2016 with respect to corporate debtors. And then I have discussed some of the recent judgments related to the corporate debtors. And finally, I have discussed some select recent trends, outcomes, etc. Then in part 3, which is my concluding part, I have discussed about the road ahead, which is the challenges and solutions, which is finally followed with my concluding remarks. So I now begin with the introduction to the insolvency and bankruptcy with the quote by OECD. A good regulatory environment is an essential foundation for high-performing nations to make their country a great place to work and live and to protect their environment. High-performing regulators are a key lever to encourage innovation across the economy and foster productive growth through timely approval processes, flexible approaches to new issues, and a service focus. So basically, the legal landscape for IBC in India prior to the IBC code was scattered and ineffective, and a new legislation was needed, not just in order to bring more effectiveness, but to keep pace with the world. This led to the enactment of IBC code on 28th May of 2016. The first order objective of the code is the resolution, and the second order objective of this code is the maximization of the value of the assets of the firm, and the third order objective are promoting entrepreneurship, availability of credit, and balancing the interests of the stakeholders. So this order of objectives is sacrosanct, and this was given by NCLT, pronounced by NCLT in Binani Industries Limited case versus Bank of Baroda case. Furthermore, a key innovation of the IBC is 4 pillars of institutional infrastructure, namely the insolvency professionals, which shall be regulated by the insolvency professional agencies, the IUs, which is information utilities, adjudicatory function or adjudication function, and finally the regulator, which is the IBBI or the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Board of India. Furthermore, the section 238 of the code gives an overriding effect on all other laws. The section 238 says that this will prevail, the IBC will prevail over any other law. So under IBC, the Indian insolvency regime, it shifted from debtor in possession to a creditor in control regime. The creditor in control model hands over the control of the debtor to its creditor, thereby relying upon the managerial skills of the newly constituted committee in order to take over an ailing company and ensure its revival. The Apex Court in Swiss Ribbons versus Union of India, it held that the core objective of the IBC is to ensure revival and continuation of the corporate debtor. Thus, the IBC has a larger public welfare consideration in play. It is equally pertinent to note that our IBC is based on the UK model, and the main intention is that the company should be pushed as a going concern during the CIRP. But shutting it down and opting it for liquidation is the last, and it should be the last resort under the compulsion of IBC. So this was the introductory part. I now move on to the discussion part of my paper. And part 1 is about the select provisions in IBC related to the corporate debtors. And I would like to skip this particular part with just a mention of the relevant sections, which are section 3 subsection 8, section 3 subsection 11, section 5 subsection 5, and section 10. I now move over to the key steps in the CIRP resolution process. So, ma'am, basically I have given 9 steps in this process, and since CIRP was not the main portion of my paper, although I have already included it, so I would like to skip that, and I'll just come to the main part of my paper, which is the implications for the corporate debtors. So, given the previous background and understanding of the CIRP, I'm going with the presumption that we all know about what is the process of CIRP. So now we can appreciate the key implications for a corporate debtor. Let us now discuss some of the implications which I have given. I've mentioned both positive as well as the negative implications. So the implications for increased threshold under the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code on 24th of March 2020, which was given by a notification. So the minimum threshold was increased from 1 lakh to 1 crore rupees. And the notification shall have ramifications for all the stakeholders, namely the LCLT, NCLT, the companies and the creditors. Firstly, from the perspective of NCLT, this will be a welcome move as it will increase the efficiency of the tribunal, resulting in the speedy disposal of the matters, as time is of a significant essence in the IBC proceedings. NCLT, as we are aware, was initially established to deal with only the company law matters, but since the introduction of the IBC, it is predominantly occupied with the activities related to IBC only now, and that too without any significant increase in the capacity. Thereby, it is kind of overburdened. However, increasing the threshold should not be considered to be a viable alternative to distress, and I emphasize this point. It should not be considered to be a viable alternative to distress. NCLT, rather its working should be improved by increasing number of personnel and branches. Secondly, while the change in IBC is hailed as a supportive measure for the MSME, the same may bite it back in the future with a greater intensity, as the operational creditors of corporate debtors in most of the cases are none other than these companies themselves. Thus, they become susceptible to being prospective corporate debtors if their existing dues are not recovered due to the increased threshold, and thus this amendment may run counterproductive to the objectives of the IBC. Thirdly, the entities that are affected most are the operational creditors, as can be seen from the number of cases given section wise in page 3 of the report. Madam, I have referred to the report of Standing Committee of Finance report 2021, which was 17th Lok Sabha Ministry of Corporate Affairs in implementation of IBC code pitfalls and solutions report. So from that I have picked some data, and basically as on 31st of March 2020, section 10 cases, 610 cases were pending, and as section 7 there were 2785 cases were pending, and section 8 5973 cases were pending. So as can be seen, what operational creditors will be most affected and will have to resort to previously set up mechanisms of debt recovery, which were time taking and ineffective. Such mechanisms may also be stalled by the way of moratorium if the CIRP is initiated against the corporate debtor if any other creditor files an application. So the Supreme Court in Committee of Creditors SR Steel versus Satish Kumar Gupta, it had discussed the role of operational creditors, thus eliminating them from the scope and protection of the IBC, which without any requisite consultation and proper basis in that regard is not feasible. So apart from this above, what I have discussed so far, this notification shall also be detrimental to the interest of the employees and workmen who are allowed to make application to the NCLT in cases of default. Since now the threshold stands modified to rupees 1 crore, the large segment of the employees would have no option for recovery other than going through the tedious and elongated court proceedings, what was happening earlier. One more key implication, what I have studied in my paper for corporate debtor, it is that that is a positive impact. Basically, it will increase the availability of credit. As the right legal system in place, it affects the lending. Furthermore, one more key positive implication would be that the corporate bond market, it will get more evolved. And again on the negative side, in some cases it might happen that a going concern with the potential to bounce back, it falls in the hand of the resolution professional, thereby exposing corporates to the unwanted resolution or insolvency process, as we have seen in some cases also, which I have referred to in my paper. And the point in cases Capital Partners versus Reliance Defence and Engineering Limited, wherein the court held that there was actually a conspiracy by the petitioner to push the insolvency, and he was claiming fees after the limitation period had expired. Further, the corporate debtors also at times they take undue advantages, like in case of Kingfisher Airlines and in case of Jet Airways. The reason for these low loan recoveries in both these cases bring to light some of the major pitfalls in the lending process itself, and also within the IBC. When the banks started their recovery efforts, they realized that neither airline had a physical assets commensurate with the size of the loans taken. Most planes they flew, they were leased and not owned. There was some real estate and some other fixed assets. My video has stopped. I'll just. Oh, okay. So, when the banks started their recovery efforts, they realized that neither airline had a physical assets commensurate with the size of the loan taken. Most planes they flew, they were leased and not owned. There was some real estate and some fixed assets on the books, but their value was really minuscule as compared to the default amount. And in service industry, most firms operate on an asset-light model. One would have expected the bankers to be mindful of collateral at least, particularly when they continued giving loans despite the signs that businesses were in deep trouble. In some cases like Vedika Nutcraft Private Limited, the corporate debtor, even after making true and correct disclosures as required under Section 10 and also satisfying all the statutory requirements, he gets stalled by the COC without pointing out any defects. In this case, ultimately the corporate debtor, CD, it filed a writ petition in the Delhi High Court and got a relief, pursuant to which the NCLT disposed the application and admitted the petition and declared moratorium under Section 14 and directed the IRP to make a public announcement. Thus, this shows that how at times NCLT is helpless due to the COC. So this was about the implications for corporate debtors. I have in my next part discussed about the legal implications like penalties etc. under the IBC 2016. However, for paucity of time, I'll just name the relevant sections and shall then move on to my next part. So section 68 I have discussed, section 69, section 70 subsection 1, section 71, section 72, section 73, section 74 subsection 1, section 75, section 77. So now I come to the part wherein I have discussed some 8 recent judgments related to the corporate debtors. However, for paucity of time, I will quickly discuss 5 of them before I move on to my next part. So first I have discussed is Phoenix R Private Limited versus Spade Financial Services Limited. So the court, basically I'm just discussing the essence of the judgment. The transactions between the CD, the corporate debtors and the related parties that are collusive in nature, they do not qualify as financial debt under the code. Now moving on to the next case, Ghanshyam Mishra versus Edelweiss Asset Reconstruction Company or ARC and others. It says the court held that no creditor can initiate proceedings, including the government, to recover claims which are not part of the resolution plan once approved by the NCLT. And also I'll quickly discuss the case which was discussed by my fellow classmate earlier, Lalit Kumar Jain versus Union of India and others. So basically the SC upholded the validity of the notification allowing the banks to proceed against personal guarantors for recovery of loans. Then in ATE Projects Private Limited and Rajasthan Drugs and Pharmaceuticals Limited and others, the CIRP against the corporate debtor, which is a government company, it was held to be permissible. Then again moving on to next case, which is Jaladi Overseas Pte Limited versus Tier Overseas Pte Limited, Private Limited, sorry. The foreign award is not sufficient to initiate CIRP against a corporate debtor. NCLT held that a foreign award is not a decree and a mere production of foreign award does not give an effect to it. The NCLT further clarified that an NCLT does not have powers of a civil court and cannot execute a foreign award. I now discuss some recent trends, outcomes, etc. So, response during the COVID-19 pandemic. The government's accommodative policy in the wake of pandemic, it has basically helped mitigate the negative effect on the economy. during the pandemic. On the realization front, 2021, and madam, I have quoted the data from the Economic Survey 2021. So as per the IBBI data published in Economic Survey, the 421 corporate debtors which were rescued when they entered the CIRP, they had a total realizable assets of 1.4 lakh crores, while they owed 2.55 lakh crore to the creditors. The resolution plans, however, realized 2.55 lakh crore, which is more than 172% of the realizable value. Though recovery is incidental under the code, I mean, it's not something not very surprising. The financial creditors recovered 32%, 32.11% to be precise, of their claims. This reflects the extent of the value erosion by the time CDs enter the CIRP, yet it is the highest, among all the options available to the creditors for recovery. There is, however, a large scope of improvement and efficiencies, but this mechanism is still by far the best option available. I have given some data, also some data published in the Economic Survey, which shows the figures of the pending CIRP. So I would not like to get into that, that is part of my paper. So on the liquidation front, I would like to discuss now. As per the IBBI data published again in the Economic Survey, the 1419 CDs, 1419 CDs, ending up with the orders for liquidation, had an aggregate claim of 7.8 lakh crores. However, they had assets on the hand which was valued only 0.52 lakh crores. Till September 2021, 264 corporate debtors have been completely liquidated, which had an outstanding claims of 45,790 crores, but the assets were valued at 2,025 crores only. 1983 crore was realized through the liquidation of these companies, and I have given the data also. Now again, going to the time and cost factor. The 421 CIRPs which have yielded resolution plans by the end of September 2021, it took an average of 428 days after excluding the time taken by the adjudicating authority for the conclusion of process. Out of this, the cost details are available in respect of 388 CIRPs. The cost basically works out on an average of 0.98% of the liquidation value and 2.54% of the resolution value. So the 1490 CIRPs which ended up in orders for liquidation, they took an average 375 days. Further, 264 liquidation processes which have closed by submission of final reports took an average of 421 days for closure. So ma'am, I have discussed other positive factors also, like I have discussed, that how, as per the Economic Survey, how IBC brings about behavioral changes in the corporate debtors. So, and also the increase in, ease of doing business, EOBD index also. So I now come to my concluding part, wherein I'll first discuss the road ahead and the challenges and solutions. So IBC, I would say, it has undoubtedly brought about a transformational change in India's insolvency regime and has also benefited the economy in a variety of ways. It is, however, important for key stakeholders to make their best endeavors to ensure that the power of IBC does not diminish. The goal must be to fill the voids that are discovered and move towards a more complex legal system over time. Some of the areas which need to be addressed are as follows. First of all, the IBC, as we all know, it is fraught with lot of delays. So in case of SR Steel, when NCLT decision came out, it was not acceptable, and the Parliament immediately amended the legislation in less than 1 month. The SC in the Parliament outperformed beyond what was even expected of them. However, as on today, there is a general feeling, and I emphasize this point, there is a general feeling and a serious suspicion that some members of the tribunal could perhaps be showing a leaning towards the promoters. For example, in a few cases, the COC wanted the RP to be changed, and the NCLT did not allow the same on the plea that the commercial wisdom was against the same and the due process was followed. So either this should be removed from the NCLT gambit so that NCLT focuses on the adjudicating function only, as a plea is taken that NCLT is already overburdened. However, on the other hand, in many cases wherein the timelines have exceeded, what I propose that it is because of the market participants also. In fact, in many cases, the NCLT, NCLAT and the Supreme Court has found gross misconduct on the part of market participants, and the IBBI has filed criminal proceedings as well against them. Thus, we cannot entirely subscribe to this view that NCLT functions in a biased manner. In fact, not all market participants are also on the right track, and they increase the load on NCLT by filing multitude of applications which are completely avoidable. So, as per the data published by the IBBI, which I have discussed, that almost 75% of the CIRP cases have overshot the timelines of 270 days. And with this, the faith in IBC regime is dwindling, it is coming down. However, as per an estimate, the 15% of these are pending with the NCLT, 75% are pending with the market participants. So, thus a simple solution can be to follow the timelines of 270 days or 330 case mechanically. So that is my proposal. It should be mechanically imposed, and if the resolution plan has not come, the liquidation should be ordered. And once this is done, all the market participants who today want to avoid coming to NCLT will then try to avoid liquidation and move much faster. Thus, the market participants also need to improve both in their conduct and capacity, including resolution professionals. A series of judgments that suggest that a hard stop of 270-330 days will not be harmful. And a simple solution, furthermore, there are several procedural reasons also that lead to these delays. Like the NCLT in first place takes a lot of time to admit cases, and then the bidders are invited and COC evaluates the bids. Many a times after the placement of first bid and the evaluation, another bid is placed, which vitiates the whole process and leads to delay. A simple solution can be not to admit such bids once COC has evaluated and approved a scheme. There should be a sanctity in deadlines so that asset value is protected and the process moves smoothly. Now, I have also discussed the cross-border insolvency regime which happened in the NCLT in Jet Airways case. The corporate, the insolvency proceedings against the CD was already initiated in the court in Netherlands, and there is no mechanism as of now in IBC to recognize the judgment of insolvency court of a foreign nation. So I'll just skip this part quickly. I'll talk about the role of resolution professionals or RPs. As they are, as RPs, I have already discussed, they are one of the 4 pillars of the insolvency resolution ecosystem. It must be ensured that quality people are appointed in order to avoid issues like not inviting an application for resolution and straight away deciding to go for liquidation, as what happened in case of Sunrise Polyfilms versus PNB case. Now coming to the Committee of Creditors, according to the MCA, the commercial wisdom of the Committee of Creditors is supreme. This was also reiterated by the Apex Court in the JP Kenningston case, wherein the court held that there was no scope of interference with the commercial wisdom of the COC. If an adjudicating authority found any shortcomings in the resolution plan, then the same should be sent back to the SCOC for resubmission. However, keeping in mind the past incidents, there is an urgent need to have a professional code of conduct for COC, as there ought to be some guidelines for example, change of IRP by another RP, so that selection is done in a more transparent manner. So this is my proposal. Now, talking about the more flexible plans, I'll just quickly say that in the practical experience, it is shown that many bidders, they might be interested in the select business units or assets rather than the entire business. So a combination of bidders taking different business units or assets may as well be far superior to one bidder acquiring the entire business, and it can also lead to quick disposal of the assets. So that is also another one of my suggestions. Now the IBC ecosystem digitization. So NCLT and NCLAT should completely digitize their records and operations, and also provide for virtual hearings for discussing with the cases swiftly and also removing pendency. And I have also given a possible alternative solution to the increased threshold. What I have suggested is, rather than modifying the threshold for every class of creditors, the government could have rather provided different thresholds for financial as well as operational creditors. This would have got approval of the judiciary as well as the Supreme Court unequivocally held that there is an intelligible differentia in the classification of financial and operational creditors. Now the problem of low recovery rates or the huge haircuts. So the problem of low recovery rates and the huge haircuts, haircuts as high as 90 to 95% is owing to multiple facts. Firstly, it depends on what stage the company is coming for resolution process. Secondly, as we already discussed, that time is the essence in the and if efficiencies are brought about, it should automatically lead to a better realization. Last but not the least, it depends on the commercial wisdom of the COC as to what plan they approve. So, why so then the COC in the first place approve a plan which leads to huge haircuts? The answer lies in the fact that in most of the cases, a much lesser value will be realized if the company goes in for a liquidation. Nevertheless, as per the data available, the resolution value is almost 188% of the liquidation value. However, the solution lies in having into place the code of conduct for COC, which I've already discussed and suggested earlier also, along with their capacity building so that they can take quality decisions. Finally, my concluding remarks. The initial years after the IBC regime was set into motion, it resulted in a series of realization of productive assets, like in case of SR Steel, Bhushan Steel, etc., Binani Cement also. And there were a lot of signal decisions given by the ANCLAD, NCLT and the courts. However, as the time passed and what the data shows, this base started going down, and there are multitude of reasons which may be assigned to this, solutions for which I have already discussed in the preceding part. There is now a general feeling that the IBC is now fraught with delays and cases are not even getting admitted in the NCLT for even more than a year. The general feeling is that the NCLT, which is not functioning as expected, but to understand and tackle the problem, we must realize that IBC's regime is like an orchestra. There are different stakeholders, including the government and the government agencies with defined roles. A set of agencies like IRPs or resolution professionals, IBBI, NCLT, and CLAD, they provide an oversight on the whole process. However, the decision makers, we must understand, they are the COC, they are the debtors, they are the resolution applicants, and all of them must perform in a synchronization of each other. There is enough evidence that there is failure on part of all these stakeholders, and that is why the process gets stalled or even gets slowed down, so much so that it defeats the basic purpose of the IBC. However, having said that, there are problems with the NCLT, like there are capacity constraints, procedural issues, modernization issues, technology issues. However, the first challenge is to be addressed is the capacity crunch which it is facing. When NCLT, as I have discussed, it was first made, it was supposed to deal with the Companies Act only. However, when IBC was added, the strength of NCLT was not increased. So, finally, I will conclude by saying that the ethos with which the IBC regime was set rolling, it still remains sacrosanct. The IBC saga is still unfolding as we face new challenges. The IBBI has been playing its role as a key pillar of the ecosystem, and performance of the insolvency ecosystem has earned due recognition. However, it needs fine-tuning from time to time in order to make it more efficient and in tune with the times. Thank you, ma'am.